In the unforgiving business of speculation, there is one skill that stands above all others, a discipline so critical that its absence guarantees certain and eventual ruin. It is not the art of making a profit, but the far more difficult and essential art of taking a loss. The amateur speculator, his mind clouded by the treacherous whispers of hope, will hold on to a losing position, praying for a miraculous reversal, while his capital, the very lifeblood of his career, bleeds away to nothing. The professional, however, knows that a loss is not a negotiation. It is a verdict, delivered by the infallible judge of the ticker tape, and it must be accepted immediately and without appeal. Jesse Livermore, a man who paid for his education with millions of dollars in losses, understood this truth more profoundly than any man who has ever played the game. He did not treat the act of cutting a loss as a matter of vague feeling or emotional impulse. He treated it as a science, a business necessity governed by a set of clear, mechanical, and unwavering rules. He had, in effect, a mental checklist, a four-step examination that provided him with a definitive, unemotional signal to exit a trade the moment it proved him wrong. This was his great defensive strategy, the fortress he built around his capital that allowed him to survive the market's most brutal assaults and to return time and again to fight another day. This is that checklist. It is a simple, powerful, and timeless guide to the most important decision any trader will ever make. It is a framework for transforming the agonizing, hope-fueled process of taking a loss into a calm, disciplined, and automatic business procedure. It is the secret to moving from the world of the 90% who lose to the world of the 10% who survive. It is the mechanical signal to exit immediately. Before we continue, please subscribe and leave a quick comment, even one word. This small action helps the algorithm show this video to more people and tells me these deep dives are worth making. For those who are committed to this journey of knowledge, who return to these lessons to sharpen their minds after the inevitable setbacks of the market, your support is the fuel that keeps this channel going. The first and most immediate step on the checklist is a principle that formed the very foundation of Livermore's timing. Step 1. The rule of immediate profit. This was his initial and most sensitive line of defense. When he entered a trade at what he had identified as a critical, pivotal point, he did not expect to wait for a profit. He demanded it. An immediate profit was the market's own, instant confirmation that his analysis and his timing had been correct. He stated it as a core belief. Experience has proved to me that the real money made in speculating has been in commitments in a stock or commodity, showing a profit right from the start. If, however, a trade did not show a profit almost immediately, if it stagnated, or worse, if it showed a loss, it was an equally clear and immediate signal. It was the market telling him in no uncertain terms that his timing was flawed. He was wrong, at least for that moment. The amateur in this situation is filled with hope. He tells himself it is just a temporary fluctuation. Livermore, in contrast, was filled with a cold, rational, and immediate need for action. He would not wait. He would not hope. He would exit the trade, taking the first small loss without a second thought. The first loss is the best loss, he insisted. It was a small and acceptable price to pay for the invaluable information that he was on the wrong side of the market's immediate current. This single, simple rule prevented a small, manageable error from ever having the chance to grow into a catastrophic, account-destroying disaster. It was his ultimate defense against his own capacity for wishful thinking. Livermore was a master at reading the tape to determine the right time to act based on the behavior of price. But one of his great contemporaries, William Gann, approached this same great puzzle of timing from a completely different, almost mystical angle. While Livermore was the supreme pragmatist, acting on the market's immediate message, Gann was the supreme theorist, a man who believed that market movements were governed by a precise, mathematical, and almost cosmic harmony of price and time. He used geometry, astrology, and ancient mathematics to forecast the exact dates of major market turns. If you wish to explore this fascinating and complex world, to understand the hidden cycles that Gann believed were the market's secret code, we invite you to subscribe to our new channel, William Gann Trading Insights. The link is in the description below. Having entered a trade that was immediately profitable, the speculator now had to remain vigilant for the first signs of danger. This brings us to the second step of the checklist, the signal that warned of a sudden and unexpected change in the market's character. Step 2. The abnormal reaction signal. Livermore knew that every healthy trend is punctuated by natural reactions, small, orderly pullbacks on lighter volume that are a normal part of any sustained advance. He was not afraid of these. He had the patience to sit through them. But he was, he said, very fearful of abnormal movements. What was an abnormal reaction? It was a sudden, violent, and unexpected break in a stock that had been, until that moment, acting perfectly. He described it with precision. A stock might have a strong advance of 6 or 7 points, but then in the last hour of the day, all of a sudden it has an abnormal break of 7 or 8 points. This was not a normal, healthy pullback. This was a danger signal of the highest order. He wrote with the force of an unbreakable law, "When something happens abnormally stock market-wise, it is flashing you a danger signal which must not be ignored." The professional speculator does not wait for a reason. He does not ask for an explanation. The tape's sudden, violent action is all the explanation he requires. A move of this character is a clear sign that something has changed, that a powerful, unseen selling force has entered the market. Livermore would not argue with this signal. He would not hope it was a temporary fluke. He would act on it instantly. He quoted another great speculator who said, "When I see a danger signal handed to me, I don't argue with it. I get out. A few days later, if everything looks all right, I can always get back in again." This is the essence of professional risk management. To ignore such a clear and violent warning is to choose hope over the market's own factual evidence, a choice that almost always leads to a costly and regrettable loss. This second step, then, was his early warning system, his protection against the sudden and unforeseen storms that can wreck even the most promising of campaigns. Having established the first 2 great lines of defense in the speculator's checklist, the immediate exit from a trade that fails to show a profit, and the swift retreat in the face of an abnormal market reaction, we now advance into the realm of pure mechanical discipline. The first 2 rules are reactive, signals that demand an instant response to the market's immediate behavior. The next 2 steps, however, are proactive. They are the predetermined, mathematically precise lines in the sand, the unshakable laws that a speculator must set for himself before the heat of battle, to be executed without thought or hesitation. These are the rules that transform risk management from an emotional art into a cold, hard science. This brings us to the third and most strategic step of the checklist. Step 3. The break of the pivotal point. This is Livermore's ultimate non-negotiable signal that a great primary trend has officially and irrevocably reversed. It is the point of no return, the market's own formal declaration that the old regime is dead and a new one has taken its place. To understand this rule is to understand the very structure of a market move. A great bull market is not a straight line. It is a series of advances and natural reactions. Each reaction establishes a higher low point than the one before it. This series of ascending lows is the very foundation of the uptrend. The lowest point of the last natural reaction is the most critical of all. It is the final line of defense for the bulls. As long as the price remains above this great support level, this reversal pivotal point, the primary trend, while it may be weakening, is not yet officially broken. But the moment this floor gives way, the entire structure collapses. Livermore had a precise, mechanical definition for this event. It was not enough for the stock to simply touch this great support level. It had to decisively and powerfully break below it. His rule was that the trend was only officially reversed after the stock had declined by 3 or more full points below the low of that last natural reaction. This was not a minor dip to be bought, but a catastrophic failure of support to be acted upon. It was a signal of such power and finality that it left no room for doubt, debate, or, most importantly, for hope. It was the market's own clear announcement that the sellers had not just gained the upper hand, they had won the war. The line of least resistance was now, and for the foreseeable future, irrevocably downward. When this signal was given, the time for all caution and all hesitation was over. It was the moment of supreme, decisive action. Any remaining long positions were to be liquidated immediately. This rule works in perfect, beautiful symmetry for a bear market. The highest point of the last natural rally in a downtrend becomes the critical resistance level. A decisive break above that point by 3 or more points is the definitive signal that the bear trend is over. It is the mechanical command to cover any and all short positions without a second thought. This rule, more than any other, is what protects the speculator from the great and common tragedy of riding a winning position all the way back down to zero. It forces him to exit, not when his emotions tell him to, but when the market's own structure has confirmed that the great move has run its course. This brings us to the fourth and final step of the checklist, a tactical masterpiece of risk management so brilliant that Livermore himself immortalized its creator. This is the rule for protecting the profits of a pyramided position. Step 4. The Pat Hearn 1-point stop. Building a great line of stock by pyramiding, adding to a winning position on a rising scale, is the key to making a fortune. But it presents a unique danger. As you add to the position at higher and higher prices, your average cost rises, making your entire, now substantial paper profit vulnerable to a single sharp reaction. How, then, does a speculator protect these accumulated gains without being shaken out of the great move prematurely? The answer was found in the simple mechanical genius of the professional gambler, Pat Hearn. His method was a perfect fusion of aggressive offense and ruthless defense. As he added each new lot to his pyramid, he would immediately place a stop-loss order for his entire position at a single critical price, 1 point below the price of his most recent purchase. This was not a mental stop. It was a hard, physical order on the books. It was an unbreakable, non-negotiable rule. Consider the simple, beautiful mechanics of this. Imagine he buys his first 100 shares at $50, his second at $51, his third at $52, his fourth at $53. He now has a substantial position, but his stop-loss is not placed below his original entry at $50. It is placed at $52, exactly 1 point below his last purchase price of $53. As the stock continued to rise, he would simply move his stop up with it, always keeping it anchored just 1 point below his most recent addition to the line. The result of this system is a fortress of protection around the speculator's profits. At any given moment, the only capital truly at risk is the small 1-point margin on his very last purchase. All the profits from the earlier lower-priced purchases are locked in, shielded by the trailing stop. A sudden, sharp reaction in the market, the kind that so often wipes out the gains of the undisciplined trader, could not touch him. He had found a way to let his profits run while making it mathematically impossible for them to run away. He declared he did not see any sense in losing more than 1 point, whether it came out of his original margin or out of his paper profits. The true power of this rule, however, is not just mathematical but psychological. It is a system designed to completely remove the speculator's greatest enemy, his own emotional indecision, from the most critical part of the trade, the exit. For the average trader, the decision to sell a winning position is an agonizing one. His mind is a battlefield of greed and fear. Greed whispers to him to hold on for just a little more, that the top is still far away. Fear screams at him to sell now, that the profit is about to vanish. He is paralyzed, caught between these two powerful, conflicting emotions. Pat Hearn's rule eliminates this internal conflict entirely. The cautionary tale of the trader named Roberts, as told in Reminiscences, is the ultimate proof of this rule's power. Having used Hearn's system to make a fortune of over $100,000 in Lackawanna, Roberts grew overconfident. When a reaction came, instead of letting his 1-point stop take him out, he let them run as though they were profits. he had fallen victim to hope. The result was inevitable and swift. Of course, every cent went, the story concludes. Before the middle of September, he was broke again, a man who had held a fortune in his hands and let it slip away because he had abandoned the mechanical certainty of his rule for the emotional gamble of a guess. Having now examined the 4 distinct and powerful rules that form Jesse Livermore's stop-loss checklist, we arrive at the final and most important stage of our study, the synthesis. These are not 4 separate, independent ideas to be applied at random. They are the interconnected components of a single, cohesive, and profoundly effective system of thought and action. To understand how they work together is to understand the very mind of the master speculator, to see the market not as a series of chaotic events, but as a logical, sequential campaign with a clear beginning, a managed middle, and a disciplined end. The checklist is a complete cradle-to-grave plan for the life of a trade. It begins at the moment of birth with step 1, the rule of immediate profit. This is the great gatekeeper. A trade is initiated, and it is immediately put to the test. If it shows a loss, it is an unhealthy infant, a venture with a fatal flaw in its timing. It is to be abandoned immediately without emotion or hope. The campaign is over before it has a chance to inflict any real damage. But if it shows a profit, the gate is opened, and the trade is allowed to proceed to the next stage of its life. Now the trade is in its youth, growing and advancing with the primary trend. It is in this phase that the speculator must remain a vigilant guardian. He is constantly on the watch for step 2, the abnormal reaction signal. This is the sudden, unforeseen illness, the violent fever that can strike down even the strongest of trends. The moment such an abnormal, violent break occurs, the speculator acts as a swift and decisive physician, ending the trade to protect it from further unknown danger. If the trend continues its healthy advance, the speculator begins to build his position, to pyramid his success. It is here that step 4, the Pat Hearn one-point stop, becomes the tactical shield, the constant bodyguard that marches alongside the growing profit. It is the rule that manages the trade on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, protecting the accumulated gains from the normal, but often sharp reactions that are a part of every great move. It is the tactical defense that allows the speculator to confidently pursue his strategic offense. Finally, every great trend, like every life, must come to an end. The stock matures, its advance slows, and the signs of old age appear. This is where step 3, the break of the pivotal point, serves as the final definitive signal. It is the market's own official announcement that the great campaign is over. It is the strategic command to liquidate the entire position, to cash in the great profits, and to return to a position of cash, ready to begin the entire process anew. From the first test of entry to the final act of liquidation, the checklist provides a clear, logical, and unemotional command for every stage of a trade. This brings us to the great and final question. If this 4-step system is so logical, so powerful, and so effective, why do the 90% of traders so consistently fail to follow it? The answer is the most difficult and most important lesson in all of speculation. They fail because, as Livermore himself discovered, a stock operator has to fight a lot of expensive enemies within himself. This checklist is not merely a set of market rules. It is a weapon in a great internal psychological war. The first great enemy is hope. It is hope that convinces a trader to hold on to a trade that is a loser from the start, violating step 1. It is hope that tells him an abnormal, violent break is just a shakeout and will surely reverse, violating step 2. It is hope that makes him see a catastrophic break of support as a bargain opportunity, violating step 3. And it is hope for just a little more that tempts him to remove his mechanical trailing stop, violating step 4. Hope, in the business of speculation, is the eternal enemy of facts. The second great enemy is fear. It is fear that causes a trader to abandon his trailing stop system. Step 4, prematurely, to snatch a small profit because he is terrified of it vanishing. He violates the rule not out of greed, but out of a fearful impatience, and in doing so he cheats himself out of the great trend-long profit the system was designed to capture. He is afraid when he should be confident, just as he is hopeful when he should be afraid. The third, and perhaps greatest, of these internal enemies is the human ego. The ego hates to be wrong. Every one of these 4 rules is, in its essence, a mechanism for admitting a mistake. To take a stop-loss is to make a formal financial admission that your judgment was flawed. The ego of the amateur cannot bear this. He would rather risk his entire account. He would rather fight the infallible tape itself than accept the simple, quiet, and professional act of taking a small loss. Livermore was not a man without an ego or without emotions. His genius was not in being a perfect, unfeeling machine. His genius was in his profound self-awareness. He knew his own capacity for these very mistakes. He wrote, "I have come to feel that it is as necessary to know how to read myself as to know how to read the tape." He understood his own human weaknesses, and he constructed this very checklist, not just to beat the market, but to protect himself from himself. This, then, is the final and most profound conclusion. This 4-step stop-loss checklist is more than a trading system. It is a discipline. It is a philosophy. It is a commitment to substituting a cold, mechanical, and proven process for the hot, emotional, and ruinous impulses of human nature. The stop-loss is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate tool of the professional, the mark of a man who treats speculation not as a thrilling gamble, but as a serious intellectual business. To adopt this checklist is to take the final decisive step away from the losing 90% and toward the disciplined, surviving, and ultimately profitable 10%. To truly understand the mind of the man who waged this internal battle more intensely than any other, to witness the epic market campaigns where these very sins were committed and ultimately conquered, the essential chronicle remains Edwin Lefebvre's 1923 masterpiece, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. This is not merely a book. It is a deep psychological portrait of a master speculator at work, a narrative that gives life and context to every one of these timeless rules. For those committed to this study, a link to the edition featuring a unique, detailed chapter-by-chapter analysis by Max Davidson, an interpretation specifically designed to translate this century-old wisdom for the modern reader, is provided in the description below.